My father and stepmother humiliated me at the wedding I planned for my sister, but when they insulted me in front of 200 guests, I activated the contract clause and left them without DJ, photography, or catering. They never expected their rejected son had that power. I'm 31 years old. I own an event planning business that I literally built from nothing, and I need to tell this story because what happened at my sister's wedding a few months ago basically closed the final chapter on a family relationship that was already dead for years. But I guess I didn't want to fully accept it. The truth is, I still have trouble processing everything, and sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing. But at the same time, I know it was the only thing I could do, after years of being treated like garbage by my own family. I guess I should start at the beginning, when I was 15 and my mom died of cancer. It was horrible, obviously, and my sister Isabella was 12 at the time, and we were both devastated, you know. It was just the two of us and our parents, and suddenly our mom was gone. My dad didn't handle it well at all. He started drinking more than usual, and basically became an emotional zombie for months. Isabella and I supported each other back then. I mean, we weren't the closest siblings in the world, but we shared that very specific pain of losing our mom so young, you know what I mean? But then, like a year later, my dad met Sharon at, I don't know where, I think at some work event or something. It was never very clear to me. And like 6 months after meeting her, they were already married, which seemed super fast to me considering my mom had barely been dead like a year and a half, but whatever. I was 16 and a half, and what did I know about adult relationships? At first I tried to give Sharon the benefit of the doubt. I thought maybe she was good for my dad, that maybe she would help all of us heal or something like that. But from day one, it was clear she had her own agenda. The first thing Sharon did when she moved into our house was literally erase any trace of my mom. And when I say any trace, I mean everything. The family photos we had in the living room, gone. The paintings my mom had chosen so carefully, replaced. Even the dishes my weir Findon and mom used, she sold them at a garage sale without even asking if we wanted to keep anything. I remember perfectly the day I came home from school and saw she had painted the walls of my room without my permission, eliminating the color my mom and I had chosen together when I was 13. When I complained to my dad, he just said Sharon was trying to make the house her home too, and that I needed to be more understanding and mature. Understanding. As if I was the one being unreasonable. But what really started to become clear was the brutal favoritism toward Isabella. I don't know if it was Sharon's thing, my dad's, or a combination of both, but Isabella became the golden child of the family overnight. Anything Isabella wanted, Isabella got. She wanted ballet classes? Of course. The best ones in the city. A trip with her friends? Here's the credit card. Meanwhile, I had to work after school at a supermarket. If I wanted to have money to go out with my friends or buy new clothes. And it's not that I expected to have everything handed to me, but the difference was so obvious, so painful, that it was impossible not to notice. Things got worse when it came time to talk about college. I had good grades. I wasn't the best student in the world, but I had a solid average and had been accepted to a decent university like 3 hours from home. I needed financial help, obviously, because college costs a fortune and my part-time job at the supermarket barely covered my personal expenses. So I sat down with my dad and Sharon, like 2 months before the semester started, and asked them if they could help me with something, anything, even just books or housing. I would pay the rest with student loans and working. My dad literally told me no. Just like that, without more. He said, I was already an adult, that I was 18 years old. He had just turned 18, by the way, and that it was time I learned to fend for myself. Sharon was sitting there with a little smile on her face, nodding as if my dad was saying the wisest thing in the world. I asked him, seriously? Not even a little bit? And he got all defensive, saying he didn't have help when he went to college, lie. His parents paid for everything, and that I needed to build character. I left that conversation feeling like absolute garbage, like I wasn't even worth the minimum effort from my own father. The ironic thing, and this still makes my blood boil when I think about it, is that when Isabella started college 2 years later, my dad and Sharon not only paid her full tuition at a super expensive private university, but they also bought her a new car, paid for an apartment near campus, and gave her a generous monthly allowance so she wouldn't have to work and could focus on her studies. When I confronted my dad about this, he told me the situation was different, that Isabella needed more support, that she was younger and more vulnerable. More vulnerable? Isabella was 19 when she started college. I was 18. The difference was that she was Sharon's favorite, and I was. Well, I was the living reminder of my dad's first wife, I guess. So I went to college basically alone, working 2 jobs while studying full-time, living in the cheapest dorm I could find, eating ramen like 4 times a week because that's what I could afford. It was hard. I'm not going to lie. There were nights where I was so tired I would fall asleep studying in the library. But it was also liberating in a way, because for the first time in years I didn't have to deal with the toxic dynamic of my house, with Sharon making passive-aggressive comments all the time, with my dad completely ignoring me unless it was to criticize me for something. During college, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I would call Isabella from time to time because the truth is she was my sister, and part of me still loved her, but the conversations were always awkward. She would tell me about her classes, her parties, the trips she took with Sharon and my dad trips. I was never invited to, by the way. And I tried to sound happy for her, but inside the resentment was eating me up. I basically stopped talking to my dad after the 2nd year of college when I called him to tell him I had gotten an important internship, and he barely congratulated me before passing the phone to Isabella so she could tell him about I don't know what thing she had done. I graduated at 22 with a degree in event management and hospitality and 0 family help. I got an entry-level job at an event planning company as an assistant, earning barely enough to pay for my studio apartment in a not-so-nice area of the city. But it was mine. I had gotten it on my own, and that meant everything to me. I worked like a dog for 3 years at that company, learning everything I could, networking like crazy, saving every penny I could. And when I was 25, I basically said, that's it. I'm going to open my own business. I took all my savings, which wasn't much, like $15,000 maybe, took out a small loan, and opened my own event planning company. The first 2 years were brutal. There were months where I literally didn't know if I was going to be able to pay my office rent. Moments where I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But I kept pushing, building my reputation, client by client, event by event, and little by little things started to take off. At some point during all this, like when I was 26, I basically cut contact with my family completely. It wasn't a dramatic decision with a big fight or anything. I just stopped trying. I stopped calling. I stopped responding to messages that didn't say anything important. I stopped showing up for Christmases and Thanksgivings where it was obvious I wasn't welcome. Isabella tried to maintain contact at first. She would send me messages asking where I was, why I didn't come to family dinners. But I always had excuses. I was always busy with work, and eventually she stopped, trying too. Years went by like that. I literally didn't speak to any of them for like 7 full years, and the truth is, it was liberating not having to deal with that constant toxicity. My business, meanwhile, was flourishing. By 29, I already had a team of 8 people, decent offices, an impressive client portfolio that included some really important weddings and corporate events. I had hired Jennifer as my operations manager, and she was simply amazing. She kept everything running like clockwork while I handled client relationships and business strategy. We weren't a giant company or anything, but we were successful, stable, and I was proud of what we had built without anyone's help. And then, completely out of nowhere, I received a wedding invitation in the mail. From Isabella. After 7 years of basically not talking about anything significant, this elegant and expensive invitation appeared with a handwritten note saying she missed me, that it would be important to her for me to be there, that she really wanted me to be part of her special day. And I, like an idiot, felt something weird in my chest when I read it. Because no matter how much I tried to pretend I didn't care, Isabella was still my sister, the one 2-year-old girl who cried with me when our mom died, and part of me wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was room to reconnect. I sent her a message, congratulating her and asking about the wedding, trying to sound casual. She told me she was marrying a guy named William, she had met at work, that they were super excited, all that stuff. And then, and I don't know what went through my head, I offered to help her plan the wedding. I told her I had a successful event planning company, that I could give her a significant family discount, that it would be my gift to her. I thought maybe that could be our way to reconnect, working together on something important to her. But Isabella rejected the offer immediately. She said Sharon had already hired someone, that everything was handled, not to worry about it. She said it in a way that felt like a stab, like she didn't even really consider my offer. She just dismissed it. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself they probably already had everything planned, and it was too late to change, but it hurt anyway. I decided to go to the wedding anyway because, well, it was my sister's wedding, and I felt I should make the effort. I bought myself a new suit, expensive, because I could afford it and wanted to look good, confirmed my attendance, and tried to prepare myself mentally to see my dad and Sharon for the first time in years. I didn't know what to expect. Honestly, if they were going to pretend everything was fine, if they were going to ignore me, if there would be drama, I had no idea. The day of the wedding, I arrived at the venue, which was this super elegant and expensive place. Very typical of Sharon. Everything had to be ostentatious and perfect. Isabella looked beautiful. I can't deny that. And for a second, when I saw her, I felt genuinely happy for her. But then I started to notice the little things. My name wasn't on the seating list with the rest of the immediate family. Instead of being at one of the main tables, they had put me at table 14, literally at the back of the room, with cousins I barely knew and some friends of William I didn't know at all. Table 14? Seriously? While my dad, Sharon, and Isabella were obviously at the main table, and even cousins who lived in other states were closer than me. I tried not to let it affect me. I sat at my table, made polite conversation with the people at my table who also looked confused to be so far away, and waited for the reception to start. The ceremony was nice, I'm not going to lie. And for a moment, I almost forgot all the resentment and just felt happy to see my sister getting married. Almost. The reception started and I was there at my table, eating the dinner, which was actually pretty good. When my dad, obviously already half drunk, came up to my table, he stood there looking at me with that face I knew so well, that mixture of disdain and disappointment he always had with me, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "So this is Tyler, my son who barely deigns to visit us. Did you come to give us the honor of your presence?" He was being sarcastic and cruel, and I felt how my whole table went uncomfortable and silent. I said, "Hi, Dad. Congratulations on Isabella's wedding, trying to keep it civil." But he didn't stop, he continued. "I heard you have a little business out there. You plan little parties or something. That must be nice, playing at being a businessman, playing. As if the last 6 years building my company from scratch, all the work, the sleepless nights, the risks I took, were a little game." He called me an embarrassment. Said I was ungrateful. That after everything he did for me, what did he do for me? I wanted to scream at him. This is how I repaid him, ignoring them for years. I tried to respond, but he cut me off, said I don't want to hear your excuses, and went staggering back to his table. I sat there feeling humiliated in front of a bunch of strangers, trying to maintain my composure, feeling my hands shaking with rage. I thought, okay. It was my drunk dad being an asshole like always, breathe, don't let him ruin the night. But then, like 20 minutes later, Sharon appeared. She came up to my table with that fake smile she always had, and asked me in front of everyone, "Tyler, honey, is that suit you're wearing rented or did you manage to buy one? Because it looks very nice for someone who's dedicated to planning little parties." Little parties. Just like my dad. As if my business was something insignificant, as if everything I had achieved was worth nothing. And then she added, "It must be difficult to build a real career when you didn't have the family structure that Isabella had, but well, everyone does what they can, with what they have, right?" And that's when something clicked in my brain. I was looking around the room, trying to distract myself from the conversation with Sharon, when I noticed something familiar about the decorations. The floral arrangements, the table design, the lighting system, everything seemed strangely familiar to me. And then I saw it. In a corner, almost hidden, one of our small banners that Jennifer always insisted on putting discreetly at every event, My company. My company was running this wedding. Sharon was still standing there waiting for me to respond to her comment, and I just said, "Excuse me for a second, Sharon." And I got up from the table and went straight to look for the event coordinator. And sure enough, there was Mark, one of my senior planners, supervising the buffet. When he saw me, his face was pure confusion and surprise, because obviously he didn't know I had any connection to this wedding. To him, it was just another event on the calendar. I asked him, "Mark, this is our wedding, right?" And he nodded and showed me the contract on his tablet. There it was, contracted by Sharon like 6 months ago. A complete premium package that included planning, decoration, catering, lighting, sound, basically everything except the venue itself and the photographer. Sharon had hired my company without knowing it was mine. Sharon's married last name was different from mine. The contract was in her name, and apparently she had handled everything through email with Jennifer. She had never come to the office or talked to me directly. It was so absurd I almost felt like laughing. But then I thought about everything. About how they had treated me for years. About how they humiliated me that night at my own table. About how my dad and Sharon had just insulted my business in public without knowing it was literally my business that was making this wedding look so perfect and elegant. And something in me just said, enough is enough. I told Mark to gather the team in the kitchen now. I called Jennifer on the phone. It was her day off, but she answered immediately, as always, and explained the situation to her. She couldn't believe it. She asked me if I was sure about what I was thinking of doing, and I said yes, to pull out the contract and review the termination clause we always included. We had a clause that said if any member of the team or the company faced abusive, discriminatory, or hostile behavior from the client during an event, we had the right to terminate the contract immediately with partial prorated refund based on services already rendered. Jennifer reviewed the contract while I waited, confirmed that Sharon had signed that clause, and told me legally we were covered if we could document the hostile behavior. I told her there were witnesses to how my dad and Sharon had insulted and humiliated me publicly, including derisively referring to my business as little parties and questioning my professional capacity. Jennifer said, "Okay, give me 30 minutes. I'm heading there with the papers and backup team." Meanwhile, I told the team what was happening. Mark was worried. He didn't want to ruin innocent people's wedding, but I explained to him it wasn't innocent people. It was my family who had treated me like garbage for years and had just humiliated me in public while enjoying a service they didn't even know I was providing. The rest of the team was outraged for me, especially Sarah, who had been working with me from the beginning and knew my whole story. Jennifer arrived with impressive speed, bringing all the necessary paperwork and 2 additional team members to help with the dismantling if necessary. We reviewed everything twice, made sure we were following everything to the letter legally, and then I told Jennifer it was time to inform the client. I went to look for Sharon, who was on the dance floor enjoying the reception without a care. I pulled her aside along with Jennifer and Mark as witnesses and told her very professionally, "Sharon, I need to inform you that I'm invoking the contract termination clause due to hostile and discriminatory behavior toward a company representative." Sharon looked at me like I was speaking another language, clearly not understanding what was happening. I explained to her, slowly, and with all the calm I could muster, that my company, Events by Tyler, yes, my name was literally in the company name. How did she not notice? Was the company she had hired to plan this wedding? That I was the owner, and that both she and my father had exhibited abusive and discriminatory behavior toward me as a company representative during this event. That according to the contract she signed, we had the right to terminate our services immediately. Sharon's face went from confusion to understanding to absolute horror in a matter of seconds. She started stammering that she didn't know, that she hadn't realized, that we couldn't do this, that it was Isabella's wedding. I told her I understood it was unfortunate, that Isabella would receive a prorated refund for services not completed, and that from that moment my team would start dismantling our equipment and decorations as professionally and discreetly as possible. Sharon started screaming, saying we couldn't ruin the wedding, that it was illegal, that she was going to sue us. Jennifer very calmly showed her the contract she herself had signed, pointed specifically to the relevant clause, and explained that we had multiple witnesses to the behavior that had justified this decision. We handed her a copy of the termination notice and our lawyer's card, in case she wanted to discuss the matter legally. And then I gave the instruction for my team to basically start the dismantling. It was surreal, honestly. Watching my team working with that professional efficiency they always had, carefully packing up the decorations, dismantling the lighting system that had transformed the venue, removing the remaining floral arrangements. They did it all with impressive discretion considering the circumstances, but obviously people started to notice something weird was happening when the ambient lights started going off and the centerpieces began to disappear. Isabella came running toward me in total panic, asking what was happening, why my people were dismantling everything. I tried to explain to her as calmly as possible that I had discovered my company was running her wedding, that her mother and our father had treated me abusively during the event, and that I was exercising my contractual right to terminate our services. She couldn't believe it. She kept saying, "But it's my wedding, Tyler. How can you do this to me?" And I told her I was sorry, but that after years of being treated like garbage by this family, I wasn't going to stand there and allow it to continue happening. My dad appeared staggering, even more drunk than before, yelling that I was an embarrassment, that I had always been a problem, that how dare I ruin my sister's day. I tried to stay calm, not let myself be provoked, but it was difficult. I told him that if he had treated his son with a minimum of respect, none of this would have happened. That if Sharon hadn't decided to insult my business publicly, none of this would have happened. That the consequences of their actions weren't my responsibility. The team finished the dismantling in like 40 minutes. They were incredibly efficient. They took all the sound equipment, all the special lights we had installed, all the decorative elements that were ours. What was left was basically an empty room with the venue's own tables and chairs and very little decoration. It was brutal. I'm not gonna lie, seeing the difference between how it looked before and after. But there was also something satisfying about it, about finally having the power to say no, no more. Sharon found me outside, while I was supervising the team, loading the equipment into the trucks. She was furious, told me I had ruined Isabella's life, that I was an ungrateful and vindictive son, that I was going to regret this. I told her very calmly that Isabella wasn't my responsibility, that I hadn't chosen this situation, that they had created these circumstances with years of mistreatment and emotional abuse. I handed her the lawyer's card again and told her any future communication had to be through him, and I left. During the following days, my phone exploded with messages and calls. Sharon sent me like 50 text messages alternating between insults, threats, and pleas, saying how could I be so cruel, that I had ruined the most important day of Isabella's life, that I was a monster. My dad left several drunk voicemails calling me everything, threatening to find me and do who knows what. I saved everything, of course. Our lawyer had told us to document everything just in case. Isabella sent me a long message saying she was devastated, that she couldn't believe I had done that to her, that I had ruined her photos and videos of the reception, that now every time she remembered her wedding, she was going to remember how her brother had destroyed everything. She didn't mention once the behavior of my dad or Sharon. Didn't acknowledge for a second that maybe there was a reason I had reacted that way. Only I had ruined everything. I was the villain of the story. Sharon started spreading her version of events throughout the extended family and on social media. She posted a fake review of my company saying we had abandoned a wedding for no reason, that we were unprofessional and cruel, that people should avoid us at all costs. My lawyer advised me on how to handle that. We documented everything for potential legal action for defamation, and I posted a professional response on our page, explaining that we had exercised a contractual clause due to abusive client behavior, without going into specific personal details. The interesting thing was that several wedding guests, who had witnessed how my dad and Sharon treated me in public, started contacting my company for future events. Apparently, they had been impressed by the professional and calm way we had handled a horrible situation, and the fact that we stood firm in our standards even when it meant losing money. In the following weeks, we got like 5 new clients directly referred from guests at that wedding, which was ironic considering Sharon was trying to destroy my reputation. About 3 weeks after the wedding, Sharon and my dad threatened to sue us for breach of contract and emotional damages. Our lawyer was super calm about it. We had the contract with the clause Sharon had signed. We had written testimonies from multiple witnesses about the abusive behavior. We had videos from the venue's security cameras showing the interactions. We had the threatening messages they had sent me afterward. Basically, we had an airtight case. Jennifer and the lawyer handled most of the negotiations. I tried to keep myself emotionally away from all that as much as I could. In the end, Sharon and my dad withdrew the lawsuit threat when their own lawyer explained to them that not only did they have no case, but they would probably end up owing more money in legal fees. We returned the prorated refund that corresponded according to the contract, not a penny more, not a penny less, everything perfectly documented. Like 2 months after all this, William, Isabella's husband, called me. It was weird to hear his voice because I basically didn't know him. I had only seen him at the wedding briefly before everything exploded. He told me Isabella wanted to talk to me, that she was upset about how things had turned out, that she felt terrible. Part of me wanted to say no, that I had already closed that door. But another part of me, that stupid part that still had hope, thought maybe Isabella had finally understood. Maybe she had reflected on everything and genuinely wanted to reconnect in a real way. I agreed to meet Isabella at a neutral cafe. Without Sharon, without my dad, just the two of us. She arrived looking tired, and when she saw me, she immediately started crying. She told me it had been horrible, that she couldn't stop thinking about what happened, that it had affected her marriage because William was upset with her about how the whole family had treated me. And I thought, okay, here it comes. She's going to acknowledge it was unfair, that Sharon and Dad's behavior was wrong, that she understands why I reacted that way. But no. Instead, Isabella started talking about how I had been selfish, about how I had let my resentment toward the family ruin her special day, and about how she didn't understand why I couldn't have waited and talked to her after the wedding. Instead of making a scene, I asked her, "Did you hear the way Dad and Sharon spoke to me that night?" And she said yes, but they were drunk, Tyler. You know how Dad is when he drinks. You shouldn't have taken it so seriously. That's when I knew there was nothing to save. Isabella had grown up being the golden child, being protected and pampered, never having to face the dark side of our father and Sharon that I had lived with for years. For her, it was easy to minimize their behavior, because it had never been directed at her. She had never had to feel the constant humiliation, the rejection, the pain of being treated like you're worth nothing by your own family. She was exactly like Sharon and my dad in that sense. She only cared about how things affected her. I got up from the table, told her it was clear she just wanted me to apologize and fix things without anyone having to acknowledge what they had done to me for years, and that wasn't going to happen. I told her I wished her the best in her marriage, that I hoped she would be happy, but that we couldn't have a relationship if she wasn't capable of seeing how toxic our family environment had been. And I left. It was the last time I spoke to Isabella, about 4 months ago now. My business is better than ever now, honestly. The word of mouth, publicity from that disastrous wedding turned out to be incredibly good for us. Apparently, people respect a company that has principles and standards. I hired 2 more people. Jennifer is considering expanding to a second location. Things are going really well. I haven't spoken to anyone in my family since that cafe with Isabella. I blocked Sharon and my dad on everything, changed my number so they couldn't keep harassing me, basically made a clean and complete cut. Last week, one of my cousins from my mom's side contacted me through LinkedIn, saying he had heard rumors about what happened at the wedding, that my mom's family had always thought my dad and Sharon treated me badly, but didn't know what to do about it. He asked me if I wanted to reconnect with that side of the family, with the people who really loved me and my mom. I'm still thinking about it. I don't know if I'm ready to let more family into my life after all this, but maybe someday. But what I do know is that I did the right thing at that wedding. Maybe it wasn't the most mature decision. Maybe I could have handled things differently. But after years of being the one who always had to put up with it, the one who had to be the bigger person, the one who had to forgive without anyone acknowledging the damage they had done to me, I finally stood up for myself. And that has to be worth something, right?